"Grandmother Alina, you're not on the guest list." Those 7 words, delivered through my daughter-in-law's perfectly painted smile, changed everything. I stood there on the church steps, holding a hand-embroidered christening gown I'd spent 3 months creating, watching Vanessa block the entrance to my only grandchild's baptism like a well-dressed bouncer. Can you imagine? 3 months of love and labor, dismissed at the church door. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to stay with me. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It warms this old heart to know where my words travel. If you're listening to this story, you're about to hear how Alina Catherine Morrison, 74 years old, former county judge, and supposedly respectable pillar of the community, became the most controversial grandmother in 3 states within 72 hours. But let me start at the beginning, 3 weeks before that humiliating Sunday morning. It was a Tuesday when my son Marcus called. I was in my garden, pruning the roses I'd planted when his father was still alive. The phone rang with that particular tone Marcus had assigned to his number, Beethoven's Fifth, because he'd always had a flair for the dramatic. "Mother, we need to discuss something important." His voice had that careful quality, the one he'd perfected during his years as a corporate attorney. The tone that meant he was about to deliver bad news while pretending it was perfectly reasonable. "What is it, darling? Is little Thomas all right?" Thomas was 6 months old, my first grandchild, and the absolute light of what I'd assumed was going to be a peaceful retirement. "Thomas is fine, perfect, actually. That's what I'm calling about, the christening." I felt my stomach tighten. Something was wrong. "Vanessa and I have been talking extensively about the ceremony. You know how important her family traditions are, and well, they have very specific customs about christening celebrations. Her grandmother Beatrice is quite traditional about these matters." I'd met Beatrice exactly twice, a charming woman who told me she was thrilled Marcus had married into a family with such sensible people. Apparently, that conversation had been revised in Vanessa's retelling. "Marcus, what exactly are you trying to tell me?" He exhaled slowly. "The thing is, Vanessa's family believes christening should be intimate affairs, immediate family only, and by their tradition, that means parents, siblings, and Vanessa's side of the family. It's nothing personal, Mother. It's just how they do things." 43 years. I'd raised Marcus alone after his father died when he was 9. Worked double shifts at the courthouse to pay for his prep school, his college, his law school. Sat through every debate competition, every graduation, every milestone. Held his hand through his first heartbreak and celebrated his first big case. And now suddenly, I wasn't family enough. And now I wasn't immediate family. "I see," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "And you agree with this assessment." "Mother, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's just one ceremony. We'll have you over for dinner the following weekend. Thomas won't even remember who was there." "But you will, and so will I." "I knew you'd understand. Thank you for being reasonable about this, Mother. I'll call you next week." He hung up before I could respond. I stood in my garden, still holding the phone, staring at my roses. Then I walked inside, poured myself 2 fingers of my late husband's scotch, and opened my laptop. You see, Vanessa Montgomery Morrison didn't know much about me beyond what she'd decided I was. A sweet old lady who baked cookies and faded quietly into the background. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 30 years as a county judge, which meant I'd dealt with entitled people and their delusions longer than she'd been alive. I also had resources she couldn't imagine. My first call was to my sister Dorothy at 9 the following morning. Dorothy is 18 months younger than me, but acts decades younger, which is exactly why I needed her. "Ellie, you never call before noon. Who died?" "No one yet, though I'm considering options. Marcus uninvited me from Thomas's christening." The explosion of outrage from Dorothy was exactly what I needed. She cursed in ways that would have impressed a sailor, questioned Marcus's parenthood, despite knowing full well I'd birthed him, and finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. "What's the plan? Because I know you've got one. You've got that tone, the one you used when you sentenced that embezzler to 10 years. I need you to do some surveillance for me. Surveillance? Ellie, we're 70-something, not Charlie's Angels. Speak for yourself. I do yoga. Now, Vanessa Montgomery Morrison, age 32, works at Preston and Associates downtown. I need to know her daily routine. There was a pause. What exactly are we looking for? Anything that might explain why she's so determined to cut me out of my grandson's life. People this controlling usually have something they're hiding. This is about more than a christening, isn't it? Dorothy always was perceptive. She was right. For 2 years, I'd watched Vanessa systematically distance Marcus from everyone who cared about him. His college roommate, David, too immature, apparently. His cousin, Sarah, too much drama. His weekly dinners with me, an unhealthy attachment that needed to be addressed. Every holiday became a negotiation where Vanessa's comfort came first. Every family gathering included subtle comments about my outdated furniture, my quaint neighborhood, my old-fashioned way of speaking. I'd stayed silent because I didn't want to lose my son, but I'd lost him anyway. Dorothy, can I tell you something I discovered last week? Always. I was at the Riverside Mall on Thursday, just browsing, treating myself to lunch at that cafe with the outdoor seating, and I saw Vanessa meeting someone, a man who definitely wasn't Marcus. Oh, Ellie, please tell me. I didn't plan to follow them, but when I saw her laugh in a way I've never seen her laugh with Marcus, touch this man's arm in a way that suggested considerable familiarity, I thought perhaps someone should document it. You got pictures. Video, actually. 42 minutes of Vanessa Montgomery Morrison being extraordinarily friendly with a gentleman who introduced himself, quite loudly, as Drew when his phone rang. Dorothy's laugh was something between admiration and concern. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to make sure my son knows exactly who he married. But first, I need more information. Can you help me? Do you even need to ask? This is why everyone needs a Dorothy in their life. Thursday morning. Dorothy and I met at the Riverside Mall food court like two suburban grandmothers planning a book club, instead of what could generously be called strategic investigation. So what's our story, if anyone asks? Dorothy wore a purple tracksuit that somehow made her look both ridiculous and completely innocent. We're shopping for christening gifts, very thoughtful, personalized christening gifts. For a christening we're not invited to. Details. We'd already established Vanessa's pattern. She left Preston and Associates every day at 12:30 for exactly 1 hour. According to the cheerful receptionist Dorothy had befriended with a story about sending surprise flowers, Vanessa was meticulous about her lunch schedule. The man from the mall, Drew, owned a boutique consulting firm 3 blocks from Vanessa's office. I'd learned this through the simple expedient of following them once, which any concerned grandmother would do. There she is, Dorothy whispered, nodding toward the coffee shop entrance. Vanessa emerged wearing a designer pantsuit that cost more than my monthly retirement check. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, her expression confident. She checked her phone, glanced around with the casual paranoia of someone used to sneaking, and walked toward the parking garage. We're really doing this, Dorothy said. We're taking a drive. If we happen to observe something interesting, that's simply good timing. 5 minutes later, we were following Vanessa's silver Mercedes through downtown traffic. She drove to a residential area I recognized, the Willows, one of those new luxury apartment complexes with names designed to sound prestigious. She parked in visitor parking and walked to Building C. Drew appeared 3 minutes later, casual as anything, and they disappeared inside together. I noted the time, 12:47 p.m. How long do we wait? Dorothy asked. As long as it takes. We waited 90 minutes. When they emerged, Vanessa's hair was slightly mussed, her lipstick reapplied imperfectly. Drew kissed her cheek before they separated, walking to their respective cars without looking back. I'd filmed everything. Sometimes, the truth writes its own evidence. Ellie, what are you going to do with this? I thought about Marcus, working 60-hour weeks to support his new family while his wife spent lunch hours with another man. I thought about little Thomas, growing up in a home built on lies. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve: truth. Friday evening found me in my home office, editing video footage with the dedication of someone preparing evidence for court. Technology has changed considerably since my days on the bench, but the principles remain the same: document everything, establish timeline, prove pattern of behavior. The doorbell rang at 7. Marcus stood on my porch holding takeout from my favorite Chinese restaurant and wearing a guilty expression that reminded me of when he was 12 and broke my favorite vase. "Mother, can we talk?" I let him in, nodding how he went straight for the kitchen table, where we'd had every serious conversation of his life. "I brought your favorite, Kung Pao chicken, extra spicy the way you like it. Guilt food. This must be serious." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "About the christening, I know the call was abrupt. Vanessa feels terrible about how it came out." "Does she?" "Her family has these very specific traditions. Her grandmother Beatrice is quite particular about proper protocol for religious ceremonies." Each lie came smoother than the last. I'd met Beatrice exactly twice, and both times she'd been delightfully unconventional, telling stories about crashing society parties in her youth and encouraging me to never let the young people tell you how things should be done. So yes, I knew a lie when I heard one. "Marcus, sit down properly. Stop fidgeting." He settled into the chair across from me. "Mother, please don't make this about you. This is Thomas's day." "You're absolutely right. It is Thomas's day, and I want it to be perfect for him." Relief flooded his features. "Really? You're not upset?" I reached across the table and took his hand. The same hand I'd held through skinned knees and broken hearts, and the day we buried his father. "Sweetheart, I just want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. I love you, Mother. You know that, right?" "I know." After he left, I returned to my computer. The video was nearly complete. 4 files total: the mall meeting, 2 separate lunchtime rendezvous at the Willows, and yesterday's particularly damning footage of Vanessa and Drew at a wine bar across town, holding hands across a table while discussing what sounded suspiciously like vacation plans. I'd also spent the afternoon creating something else: a comprehensive timeline of Vanessa's behavior over the past 2 years. Every isolated friend, every canceled family gathering, every decision made without consulting Marcus. Pattern of control, manipulation, isolation. 30 years, as a judge teaches you how to build a case. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Thanks for understanding, Mother. You're the best. See you next weekend." I typed back, "Have a beautiful ceremony, darling. Thomas deserves only the best." True words, every single one. But words weren't going to be enough this time. Sunday morning dawned clear and perfect for a christening. 72 degrees, gentle breeze, the kind of spring day that makes everything feel possible. I dressed carefully in a navy dress and sensible heels, grabbed a folder containing printed materials I'd prepared, and drove to St. Catherine's Church. The parking lot was filling with guests. I recognized several people from Marcus's firm and various members of Vanessa's extensive family. Everyone looked happy, dressed in their Sunday best, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. I parked in the back row and watched the preparations. The ceremony would begin at 11, reception in the church hall afterward. I'd helped Marcus plan enough of this event to know every detail back when I was still considered family. At 10:30, I walked into the church vestibule like I belonged there. No one questioned a well-dressed elderly woman carrying what appeared to be church materials. "Excuse me," I asked a helpful usher. "Could you direct me to where the Montgomery Morrison christening party is preparing?" "Of course. The family room is just down that hallway, first door on the right." I walked down the hallway, past inspirational posters about faith and love, until I heard Vanessa's voice through the partially open door. "God, I'm so relieved Marcus's mother isn't here. Can you imagine? She would have found some way to make this about her." The woman still thinks it's appropriate to just drop by unannounced. It's like she doesn't understand boundaries. Her sister laughed. At least you won't have to deal with her much longer. Once you guys move to Seattle, she'll be 3,000 miles away. Seattle, they were moving. Can you imagine overhearing that about your own son's life? I moved closer, pretending to examine a notice board on the wall. Marcus doesn't know yet, Vanessa continued. I'm going to tell him after the christening. The partnership offer came through last week, and honestly, it's the perfect excuse to get away from all his baggage. His mother is exhausting with her constant need for attention, and don't even get me started on his ridiculous friends. Another voice chimed in. What if he doesn't want to move? Vanessa's laugh was cold enough to frost glass. He'll do whatever I tell him to. He always has. The man is completely manageable. I'd heard enough, more than enough. I walked to the church office, asked to speak with Father Michael, and explained that I had some information the groom should see before the ceremony proceeded. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Father Michael's office with Marcus, who'd been pulled from the family room with an excuse about paperwork issues. Mother, what are you doing here? I thought you understood. Marcus, I opened the folder and placed the first photograph on Father Michael's desk. I need you to see something. The photograph showed Vanessa and Drew at the wine bar, holding hands, leaning close in a way that suggested considerable intimacy. Marcus stared at it like he couldn't process what he was seeing. What is this? This is your wife having lunch with a man named Drew Patterson. He owns a consulting firm downtown. I placed down another photo, and another, each one documenting a different meeting, a different intimate moment. Mother, this could be anything. A business colleague, a friend. A friend she meets at a private apartment 3 times a week. A friend she holds hands with while discussing vacation plans. A friend she kisses in parking garages. His face went white. You've been following her. I've been protecting my son, which is apparently more than his wife has been doing. I played the video on my tablet. Not all of it, I'm not cruel, but enough. Vanessa entering the apartment building at the Willows, emerging 90 minutes later with mussed hair and reapplied makeup. The wine bar conversation where I'd enhanced the audio enough to hear her say, just a few more months and we'll figure out how to make this permanent. Marcus watched in silence, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. There's more, I said gently. Things you should know before you make this commitment before God and everyone you know. I told him about the Seattle move, about the partnership she'd accepted without discussing it with him, about the conversation I'd overheard that morning where she'd called him manageable. When I finished, Marcus sat in silence for several long minutes. Father Michael, who'd witnessed the whole revelation, looked deeply uncomfortable but said nothing. The christening starts in 20 minutes, Marcus finally said. Everyone is here. Thomas is wearing the family christening gown. What am I supposed to do? That's your decision, sweetheart. But you should make it with full knowledge of who you're standing beside when you make promises before God. Father Michael spoke up. Marcus, a christening can be postponed if necessary. The important thing is that Thomas is baptized into the faith, not when or under what circumstances. Marcus stood up, his movements mechanical. I need to talk to Vanessa. Do you want me there? I asked. No, I need to do this alone. He paused at the door. Thank you, Mother, I don't know how I feel about any of this right now, but thank you. What happened next became the talk of St. Catherine's Church for years to come. Marcus confronted Vanessa in the family room. The entire conversation was audible to everyone waiting in the hallway, including approximately 40 guests who'd arrived early and were now getting far more drama than they'd expected from a christening ceremony. Vanessa's voice rose to a shriek when she realized what evidence Marcus had. She called me every name imaginable, accused me of hearing private investigators, I hadn't, and threatened legal action for invasion of privacy. Marcus's voice remained calm but cold as winter steel. You were planning to move us across the country without even asking if I wanted to go. You've been having an affair. You just called me manageable to your sister, and somehow my mother is the villain here. Your mother is a controlling, manipulative witch who can't stand that you have a life without her. My mother is the only person in this entire situation who has told me the truth. The christening was postponed indefinitely. Guests were sent home with apologetic explanations about family emergency. Vanessa's family left in a convoy of angry vehicles, with her sister shouting something about lawyers as they peeled out of the parking lot. I drove home, fed my cat, made myself a cup of tea, and waited. Marcus arrived at my house at 3 o'clock, still wearing his christening suit, carrying Thomas in his car seat. "Can we stay here tonight?" he asked. "I don't want to go back to that house." "Of course, your room is exactly as you left it." We spent the evening in comfortable silence. Marcus held Thomas, stared at his son with the kind of devotion that reminded me why I'd done what I'd done. Whatever else happened, this child deserved parents who were honest with each other. "Mother, I need to ask you something. Anything." "How long have you known about the affair?" 3 weeks. I saw them together by chance and then kept observing. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" I thought about this carefully. Would you have believed me without proof? Or would Vanessa have convinced you I was a jealous mother making things up? He was quiet for a long time. "She would have convinced me you were lying. She's very good at that." "I know. You ruined my son's christening." "No, sweetheart. Vanessa's choices ruined your son's christening. I just made sure you knew the truth before you stood before God and your community." The week that followed was chaos. Vanessa hired an aggressive attorney who sent threatening letters about invasion of privacy and defamation. My own attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd practiced family law for 40 years, laughed at the threats and sent back an equally aggressive letter detailing exactly how evidence of adultery obtained by a concerned family member in public spaces was perfectly legal. Marcus filed for divorce, citing adultery and fraud. Vanessa moved out of their house and into an apartment, coincidentally, the same luxury complex at the Willows where she'd been meeting Drew. Drew's wife filed for divorce 3 days later. Apparently, several other wives in their social circle had similar stories about Drew's consulting services. And I became simultaneously celebrated and vilified in our community. Some people called me a hero. "She protected her son," they said. "She exposed a cheater before that poor man made a permanent commitment." Others called me controlling and invasive. What kind of mother spies on her? Daughter-in-law. She probably drove the poor woman to have an affair with her constant interference. The local newspaper ran an opinion piece about boundaries and family dynamics that mentioned my case without nomming me directly. Everyone knew who they meant. I didn't care about any of it. Marcus was safe. Thomas would grow up knowing the truth. That was all that mattered. 3 months later, Marcus and Thomas moved back into my house, temporarily, while the divorce proceeded. Temporary became 6 months, then longer. I woke every morning to the sound of my grandson babbling in his crib. Made coffee while Marcus got ready for work. Spent my days caring for Thomas, reading him stories, teaching him to identify birds in the garden. For the first time in 2 years, my son smiled regularly, laughed at jokes, called his friends, showed up to family dinners without constantly checking his phone for approval from Vanessa. One evening, while Thomas played with blocks on the floor and Marcus reviewed divorce papers at the kitchen table, he looked up at me. "Mother, can I ask you something? Always. Do you regret it, the way everything happened? Sometimes I wake up and think about the scene at the church, all those people, how humiliating it must have been for everyone." I set down my tea and considered the question carefully. "I regret that you were hurt. I regret that Thomas's christening became about adult drama instead of celebrating his faith. But do I regret making sure you knew the truth before you made permanent promises? No." A harsh answer, maybe, but an honest one. A lot of people think you went too far. A lot of people don't have to live with the consequences of your choices. I do. You're my son. Thomas is my grandson. If protecting you makes me the villain in someone else's story, I can live with that." He smiled, and it was the same smile he'd had as a little boy. "You're kind of terrifying, you know that." "Good, someone needs to be." The divorce was finalized 9 months after the christening that never happened. Marcus got primary custody of Thomas. Vanessa got the house, half the assets, and moved to Seattle with Drew, whose own divorce had gone considerably worse for him. We held Thomas's christening on a Sunday in October, exactly 1 year after that original disaster. Small ceremony, close friends and family only. Father Michael presided, making gentle jokes about second chances and divine timing. This time, I stood at the baptismal font as Thomas's godmother, wearing a smile that came from genuine joy rather than vindication. After the ceremony, during the reception at my house, Marcus pulled me aside. "Thank you, Mother, for everything. I know this year has been complicated." Complicated is an interesting word choice. "You know what I mean. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see, for being brave enough to show me the truth, even though you knew I might hate you for it." "Did you hate me?" "For about a week, yes. Then I realized you'd saved my life." We stood together, watching Thomas charming everyone with his 8-toothed smile, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy. "The tea at this reception is excellent. Next time, remind me to be there for the original scandal instead of just hearing about it secondhand." I smiled and typed back, "Next time we'll plan it together." Though honestly, I hoped there wouldn't be a next time. 2 years have passed since that Sunday morning when Vanessa told me I wasn't on the guest list. Thomas is 2.5 now, a delightful chaos of energy and questions and unconditional love. Marcus is dating someone new, a kind woman named Rebecca who teaches 3rd grade and actually seems to enjoy family dinners. She brings homemade bread, asks questions about my garden, and treats Thomas like he's the most fascinating person she's ever met. Last month, Rebecca asked if I'd teach her my famous pot roast recipe. I said yes. Vanessa sends cards on Thomas's birthday and occasional texts asking for photos. Marcus shares them, civil but distant. She married Drew last spring in a small ceremony in Seattle. I sent a gift, a beautiful picture frame with a note that said, "Wishing you both complete honesty in your marriage." Marcus thought it was hilarious. Dorothy said it was passive-aggressive. I called it honest. And me? I'm 74 years old, still tending my garden, still doing yoga 3 times a week, still maintaining the friendships and connections that Vanessa once tried to sever. I'm also known in certain circles as the grandmother who crashed the christening, which is not entirely accurate but makes for better storytelling. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it differently. If I'd handle the situation with more subtlety, less drama, more consideration for everyone else's feelings. My answer is always the same. I would do exactly what needed to be done to protect my son. Maybe not in precisely the same way. I've learned a few things about discretion and timing, but the essential actions would remain. Because here's what I learned in 30 years as a judge and 74 years of living. Sometimes the truth is cruel, but it's still the truth. Sometimes love means making hard choices that everyone else will criticize. Sometimes being a good mother means being the villain in someone else's story. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, the truth sets everyone free. Even if it takes crashing a christening to deliver it. Last week, Thomas asked me why he had 2 birthday parties, one with Mama Vanessa in Seattle and one here with us. Because sometimes, I told him, families are complicated, but that just means you get twice the cake. He thought about this with the seriousness only a 2-year-old can muster. I like cake. Me too, sweetheart, me too. Marcus came into the room and ruffled Thomas's hair. Mother, Rebecca and I were thinking about having dinner here Friday. Would that be all right? Of course, I'll make the pot roast. The famous pot roast that crashed a christening. That's the one. He laughed, and it was the sound of someone who'd found their way back from darkness. Later that evening, After Thomas was asleep and Marcus was reviewing case files in his old room, I sat in my garden with a glass of wine and thought about everything that had happened. A woman I'd never particularly liked had insulted me, excluded me, lied to my son, and nearly destroyed his life. In response, I'd exposed her truth in the most public way possible. Was I proud of it? That's complicated. Was I sorry? Not particularly. Would I recommend this approach to other grandmothers facing similar situations? Absolutely not. Hire a private investigator, consult an attorney, and for heaven's sake, don't document everything yourself unless you're comfortable becoming a cautionary tale. But would I do it again, knowing what I know now, in a heartbeat? Because my son is happy, my grandson is thriving, and I get to be part of their lives in a way that matters. And isn't that the only ending that matters? Some secrets are worth keeping, others are worth exposing. The trick is knowing the difference. And sometimes, if you're very careful and very lucky, the truth sets everyone free. Even if you have to crash a christening to deliver it. Eleanor Catherine Morrison lives in Riverside with her son Marcus and grandson Thomas. She grows roses, practices yoga, and occasionally dispenses unsolicited advice about honesty in relationships. She may or may not be considering writing a memoir titled How to Ruin a Christening and Save Your Son, a Grandmother's Guide. If you enjoyed this story, share it with someone who believes truth matters more than appearances. And remember, mothers never stop protecting their children, no matter how old those children get. Your voice matters, your truth matters, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to stay silent. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.